Hey folks, this is Fernando doing another video for More Survivalist. But before I get started, I want to say thanks to all of you guys that have shown your support with my new book, Bugging Out and Relocating. The link for my book in Amazon is going to be somewhere there below. Doing great so far, so thanks a lot. It's a book in which I try to explain what I've learned through the process of leaving Argentina, the preparations that we had in place in case we had to leave faster, bugging out locally, relocating different countries, different options, and bugging out abroad, leaving the country entirely when you just cannot stay anymore. Let's get started with this video. It's about straight and serrated edge blades, the difference in understanding which those are. I'm going to be using for a practical, simple example my beloved Leatherman Charge TTI. And we have a little bit of cordage here. The nice thing about the Leatherman Charge TTI is that you have both blades. You have a straight edge blade and you have a serrated blade. Let's try out something very simple, such as cutting a piece of rope, right? We have a little bit of cord, we put the edge there, a little bit of strength, cuts through. Do the same thing with the serrated blade. All right, we push, trying to push, cut, doesn't really work. I put a little bit of strength sideways so as to slice a little bit, and then it cuts beautifully well. That's just illustrating what happens on a practical level, but I think it's always better, whenever possible, whenever you can explain things mathematically, to do so, because it illustrates things beautifully well. At least that's the way I see it. The difference between straight and serrated edge blades is basically about a simple equation. Pressure equals force divided area, right? The same principle that applies to the difference between straight and serrated edge blades, it's the same principle that applies whenever you have any kind of knife and you have a tip. If you look at that tip through let's make a little magnifying glass, you have the tip of your knife here. All right, that tip, why is that tip going to be penetrating? Because the area that that little tip has is almost infinitely small. It's an extremely small area of contact. Okay, the smaller the area, the greater the pressure you're going to be having. That same principle applies to serrated blades. When you have another magnifying glass over here, you have a serrated blade. Those little teeth are going to be working like the tip of a knife as well. That's why in general you see that knives, serrated edge knives, do rather well with hard materials like hard plastic or wood. In general, you will see people mention serrated edge blades being better for tough materials. This is the reason for that, because whenever you're cutting a very strong material, like let's suppose a hard plastic, and you apply pressure, those little points are going to be penetrating easier than straight edge blade making contact with whatever material you have in mind. That's the first advantage that the serrated edge has. Once it penetrates and you move it sideways, one other advantage is that once those little tips dig in deep, you are taking advantage of the geometry, that curvature that the serrations have themselves. You're basically hooking on the material, and whenever you move back and forth, you are back and forth when slicing rather than push cutting, you are not only depending on the pressure that you're applying sideways, you're already hooking thanks to that geometry of the curvature of the serrations themselves. All right, now you have to understand that you basically have two types of cutting with a knife. If you have a knife and you are cutting by straight pushing in this direction like that, basically what you would be doing when peeling an apple, or when shaving, or when whittling wood, or when carving. In those straight line motions, you are going to be having better results with a straight edge blade. The reason for that, again, is same equation that we were talking about before. Whenever you're push cutting with your knife, if I have serrations and I have a somewhat softer material, the area of contact is, once it penetrates, the tips of the serrations penetrate, the area of contact is going to be all the length of that curvature, which is greater than a straight line. All right, the length of that curvature, once it starts penetrating, it's going to be greater than the single straight edge blade. Okay, now if I'm, instead of push cutting, I'm slicing, moving the knife back and forth, I'm taking advantage of that curvature and hooking those serrations in the material that I'm cutting. That's why in general you will find that a serrated blade knife is more likely to be found in utility use type of knives. For example, the Victorinox rescue tool, you have those serrations there, okay, and these happen to be in the right place. You have them in the tip of the knife. Another advantage that serrated blades, that serrations have, is that the area of contact is reduced compared to a straight edge knife. If you have, for example, a straight edge knife and you're cutting on a plate, the entire edge of the knife is making contact with the harder surface of the knife. Now, that same knife, if it has serrations, exaggerated of course here, only the tips are coming into contact with the ceramic plates. And let's suppose you're cutting meats, or you're cutting some other type of food. Those little tips are the ones that are going to be getting dull first, but the edge within that curvature is not making contact with the hard surface, and therefore whenever you apply a little bit more force, you reach that sharper edge within that curvature that is spared from coming into contact with the harder material that's going to be taking away the edge. That's why in general you find these kitchen knives generally have serrations, and they will last longer than straight edge knives because of this reason. Yet another advantage that it has. Which is better than? Which one is better, serrated or straight edge knives? It depends on the job you're using it. If you're going to be using it for a knife for emergency use, and you're thinking of cutting lots of cordage, of rope, a serrated blade knife is going to be doing that better than a straight edge knife. Simply because the little serrations, that curvature that it has, it just goes through it like nothing. You are taking much greater advantage of the physics of it. That curvature hooks into the material you're cutting, and whenever you push, you don't have to depend on the pressure that you apply alone. You're already hooking into it, and all the strength that you put into it is applied in cutting. I'm kind of stretching it there, but you see it yet again. Whenever I'm using a straight edge knife, I don't have anything hooking in the material. I have to rely only on the pressure that I put sideways myself. A sharp knife will still cut beautifully well, but a serrated blade will do it better whenever slicing like that. Whenever I'm slicing like that, I'm going to be having better results with the serrated edge knife. Just slashes into whatever I'm cutting with more ease. Now, of course, then you have to notice that in practical terms, a serrated knife is a little bit more complicated to keep sharp. A straight edge knife if you know how to sharpen a knife, it's much easier to keep it razor sharp, and it's really not that much of a challenge. A very sharp knife will just cut through this type of material better. The point where it gets a little bit more noticeable, the difference, is whenever you're going to be cutting maybe something like this, like a hard plastic. If I'm going to, even with a very sharp knife, if I try to cut it with that straight edge knife, I'm going to be having more of a challenge than using those serrations, because of what we were talking about at first. Those tips are going to be stabbing and penetrating much better, almost like a saw, compared to a straight edge. Look, just with a couple of passes, it's already marking it nicely. It just stabs and penetrates much better thanks to the smaller area, contact area. And with using push cuts, whenever it digs deep, I have more length because of the curvature compared to the straight edge. So that's where the straight edge shines and outperforms the serrated one when push cutting. Okay guys, and that's basically why you usually see in utility blades, you will see serrations more often. For an emergency use type of blade like this one, like the Soldier Victorinox, even the US military bayonet, I think one of their models has serrations close to in the lower part. It has serrations. Why is that? Well, basically taking advantage of that property that it has. Even with a dull knife, there's a good chance that the edge within the serrations, within that curvature, maybe the tip got dulled a little bit more, but on the inside of that curvature, there's still enough of an edge left so as to slash and cut through cordage, through tapes, that sort of thing, where maybe in a military type of use it would be necessary during an emergency. Okay folks, that's basically it. Some of the information and the difference between straight and serrated edge knives and how it applies, and the physics as of why that is. Folks, remember to subscribe. Take care, have a great day, and see you in our next video.